4:47 a.m., May 3rd, 2026. San Antonio, Texas. 31 federal agents moved through the pre-dawn dark in 3 separate convoys, headlights off, engines low. 3 storage facilities, 3 simultaneous entry points, 14 children somewhere inside. Total ransom paid, $1, 1 million. Paid in fear, paid in silence. Paid across 6 months by 9 families who believed that calling law enforcement would get their children moved across the border forever. The network had been running since December 2025. By the time agents positioned themselves outside the first facility on Perrin Betel Road, it had already collected more than $1 million from Venezuelan and Honduran immigrant families scattered across 3 states. And not a single family had gone to the police. What broke it open wasn't a tip. It wasn't an informant. It was a compliance flag at a Western Union branch in Dallas, and a photograph of a little girl standing in front of a yellow wall. The story of how HSI traced a ghost network through burner phones, telegram encryption, and a chain of storage units in the San Antonio suburbs starts not with federal agents, but with a mechanic in Phoenix who spent 6 weeks wiring money to strangers and praying his daughter was still alive. His name, for purposes of this account, is Marco Delgado. He had arrived in Arizona 18 months earlier. He worked at an auto shop on West Thomas Road, 6 days a week, 10 hours a day. His daughter, Camila, was 8 years old. She had been living with his sister-in-law in Dallas while he saved enough to bring the rest of his family north. In late November 2025, Camila stopped answering the phone. His sister-in-law stopped answering too. Then, on December 3rd, 2025, a voice message arrived on Marco's phone through Telegram. Male voice, calm, Spanish with a northern Mexican accent. The message told him Camila was safe, that she was being held at a secure location, that she would stay safe as long as he paid $2,000 per week and said nothing to anyone. The message included a 10-second video. In it, Camila held a handwritten sign with the current date. She wasn't visibly harmed. She didn't speak. Marco wired the first payment that afternoon. What Marco didn't know, what none of the 9 families knew, was that they weren't alone. Across Dallas, Phoenix, and Atlanta, 8 other families had received near-identical telegram messages within the same 2-week window in late November and early December 2025. Different recordings, same pattern. A calm male voice, Spanish delivery, a proof-of-life video with a handwritten date, and a payment demand ranging from $2,000 to $4,500 per week, sent via Western Union or through cryptocurrency wallets using peer-to-peer exchange apps. The families shared one critical detail. They were undocumented or had pending immigration cases. Every message included the same warning, delivered with the same flat certainty. If law enforcement was contacted, the children would be taken to Mexico within 24 hours. No further contact would be made. The families would never hear from their children again. That warning worked. For almost 5 months, it worked completely. The 9 families paid. From savings, by borrowing from relatives, by working double shifts. Marco Delgado wired $4,500 over 6 consecutive weeks before the first crack appeared in the network's armor. HSI, Homeland Security Investigations, runs an embedded financial intelligence cell that cross-references high-frequency wire transfer activity with known trafficking and extortion patterns. The cell operates out of the Dallas field office and runs automated compliance flags against data shared by Western Union, MoneyGram, and several cryptocurrency exchange platforms under a standing information sharing agreement established in 2021. On January 14, 2026, a compliance officer at a Western Union branch on Harry Hines Boulevard in Dallas noticed something. A customer, later identified as one of the 9 families, had made the same transfer to the same recipient routing code for the same amount 4 weeks in a row. The branch officer followed standard protocol and filed a suspicious activity report. Routine. It went into the system. 3 weeks later, it landed on the desk of HSI senior analyst Denise Okafor at the Dallas field office. When Okafor pulled the full transaction record, she didn't find one family. She found 3. 3 separate Western Union customers across the Dallas metro, all sending payments in the same weekly cadence, all routing to overlapping intermediary codes that connected, after 2 layering steps, to the same cluster of peer-to-peer cryptocurrency wallets. She flagged it. She requested expansion to include Phoenix and Atlanta. The expanded search took 11 days to process through the interagency data sharing pipeline. When results came back on February 9, 2026, the cluster had grown to 9 families across 3 states, with a combined transfer volume over $600,000 and climbing. Okafor formally opened an HSI case file on February 11, 2026. She called it the Telegram Ransom Cluster. A 5-person analytical team was assembled. They had one initial lead: a cluster of Telegram account identifiers pulled from metadata shared by the platform's EU-based compliance office under a mutual legal assistance request that HSI's cybercrime unit had filed 6 months earlier in connection with a separate trafficking case. 2 of the identifiers matched the sender profile of the ransom messages. The accounts were burners, created using disposable SIM cards and routed through a VPN node in Panama. The phone numbers had been deactivated within days of each ransom cycle beginning, but the account creation timestamps and metadata fingerprints were there, and they pointed, faintly, indirectly, to handset devices that had pinged towers in the San Antonio metropolitan area. Here's what surprised me most about the early phase of this investigation. The network wasn't particularly sophisticated at the technical level. Telegram accounts, burner phones, cryptocurrency layering, standard tools. What made the operation work was not the technology. It was the targeting. Someone had specifically identified undocumented families with separated children and cross-border ties. Someone had done research. The network wasn't casting wide. It was aiming precisely. That precision was the first thing that told Okafor this wasn't a freelance operation. I spent time going through the case file reconstruction on this one, and one detail kept pulling me back: the proof-of-life cadence. Every family received a proof-of-life video within 48 hours of their first payment, and every 2 weeks after that. 10 to 15 seconds, a child holding a date card, sometimes speaking a few words. The production was consistent, controlled lighting, no visible background, a single camera angle. Whoever was managing those videos was running them like a logistics operation, not a crime of opportunity. By late February 2026, HSI had identified all 9 families. Investigators made contact through an HSI community liaison unit that specialized in immigrant outreach. The approach was deliberate. Agents didn't present badges at front doors. They didn't arrive in marked vehicles. They used Spanish-speaking civilian community advocates to make first contact, establish trust, and explain, slowly, carefully, that law enforcement already knew about the payments and that the families were not in legal jeopardy for making them. Not all 9 families agreed to cooperate right away. 2 families in Dallas refused initial contact entirely. One in Atlanta didn't respond for 3 weeks. Marco Delgado in Phoenix was the first to agree to a full interview. He sat with 2 HSI agents and a Spanish-language interpreter for 4 hours on February 28, 2026, at a neutral location, a church meeting room arranged through the community advocacy group. He brought his phone. He had saved every Telegram message, every payment confirmation, every proof-of-life video. He hadn't deleted a single file. The 7 videos showed his daughter, Camila, in what appeared to be the same location each time. A plain wall, consistent ambient temperature, consistent lighting. In the 6th video, received on February 7th, 2026, Camila was holding the date card at a slightly different angle. The camera had shifted 2 feet to the right. In the upper left corner of the frame, partially cut off, was the edge of a logo. Yellow background, block letters. A partial U and a partial S, and the top curve of what might have been a hyphen or a dash. Marco had noticed it immediately. He had stared at it for hours. He searched every storage company logo he could find that used yellow and block letters. He kept coming back to one, U-Store-It. 3 U-Store-It facilities in the San Antonio area. He wrote the addresses on a piece of notebook paper and tucked it in his wallet. He hadn't called the police. The warning was still in his head. He handed the notebook paper to the HSI agent across the table. His hands weren't shaking. He had been carrying this information for 3 weeks, alone, and now he was putting it down. The agent photographed the page without comment. The interview continued. Back at the Dallas field office, Okafor's team ran the U-Store-It logo against the partial frame from the proof-of-life video using an image-matching algorithm. 3 U-Store-It facilities in the San Antonio metro. One on Perrin Baytel Road, one on Culber Road near Loop 1604, one on Roland Avenue in the Kirby suburb. All 3 were cross-referenced against utility records, lease agreements, and a HSI-requested property data pull from Bexar County. One storage unit at the Perrin Baytel facility had been leased in January 2026 under a business name, a landscaping LLC registered in Laredo. The registration was 18 months old. It listed a principal agent with no prior record in federal databases. But the LLC's registered agent address was a mail forwarding service used by 17 other companies, 4 of which had prior HSI flags for suspected money movement tied to border logistics networks. That was the thread. On March 6, 2026, HSI formally requested surveillance authorization for all 3 U-Store locations. A federal magistrate judge in the Western District of Texas granted it on March 10th. Physical surveillance teams deployed on March 12th. For 19 days, nothing visible happened. The storage units appeared inactive. No foot traffic. No vehicle movement beyond routine customer access to adjacent units. The surveillance team documented license plates on every vehicle entering each facility. 31 plates were flagged for further analysis. 12 came back to vehicles with prior involvement in ICE administrative cases. Not criminal records, but immigration enforcement history. 1 vehicle, a gray Dodge cargo van with a Laredo registration, appeared at the Perrin-Beitel facility on March 15th, March 22nd, and March 29th, 2026. Each visit lasted between 40 and 70 minutes. The van parked in the same spot each time, in the row closest to units 47 through 52. The driver never got out. That wasn't normal storage facility behavior. On April 1st, 2026, the surveillance team requested expanded monitoring authorization. HSI San Antonio joined the case, embedding their cybercrime division into the analytical team. The cybercrime unit worked backward through the Telegram account metadata, through the VPN routing node in Panama, and into the server architecture supporting the Telegram cluster. What they found, after 12 days of technical work coordinated with HSI's International Liaison Office, was that the Telegram cluster wasn't running on a consumer account. It was running on a semi-professional relay system, a setup that required someone with specific knowledge of encrypted messaging infrastructure. That level of technical sophistication didn't belong to a local crew improvising. It pointed to either outside technical help or a crew member with a background in communication systems. An obstacle surfaced here that nearly derailed the timeline. The cybercrime team's request to trace the server relay through a European hosting provider required a mutual legal assistance treaty request through the Department of Justice's Office of International Affairs. Standard processing time, 60 to 90 days. The case didn't have 60 days. Children were in those units. The team filed an emergency MLAT request on April 7th, citing imminent risk to minors. It cleared through DOJ on April 14th. 7 days, which was unprecedented. The European provider complied within 48 hours. What came back identified 2 additional relay accounts in the Telegram cluster that hadn't previously been flagged. These accounts had been used for internal coordination, between network members, not between the network and victim families. The message logs, now partially decrypted with technical assistance from HSI's signals unit, referenced 3 locations: Perrin-Beitel, Culebra, and Roland. All 3 U-Store facilities. The case shifted from surveillance to raid planning on April 19, 2026. ATF was brought in on April 22nd after intelligence suggested the network had armed security at least 1 location. A joint task force was formally constituted on April 25th. ICE, HSI, ATF, with operational command assigned to HSI San Antonio Special Agent in charge Rodrigo Varela. The task force numbered 47 personnel across the 3 raid teams. Think about Varela's position for a moment. 14 children at unknown distribution across 3 facilities. No way of knowing how many were at each site. No way of knowing if the network had a dead man protocol, a trigger for moving or harming the children if one location was hit before the others. Simultaneous entry wasn't optional. It was the only viable approach. And simultaneous entry across 3 geographically dispersed locations, all timed to the same 60-second window, leaves almost no margin for error. The planning team ran the scenario 22 times in tabletop exercises between April 25th and May 2nd. Every variable mapped. Response time from adjacent units if entry teams were compromised, medical evacuation routes to the nearest pediatric emergency facility, Spanish language trauma counselors pre-positioned at all 3 extraction points. 20 minutes before the operation launched, a complication surfaced. The floor plans filed with Bexar County for the Culebra Road facility were outdated. The building had been internally reconfigured in 2023. Additional partition walls, a different unit numbering system. The entry team for Culebra had been planning around a layout that no longer existed. The team lead, HSI Special Agent Carla Mejia, had 11 minutes to revise the entry sequence using current satellite imagery and a walkthrough from a facility manager roused at 4:15 a.m. on a secure call. She rebuilt the approach map on a tablet in the back of a tactical vehicle. The revised plan was briefed to her team in 4 minutes. At 4:47 a.m., all 3 entry teams received the go signal simultaneously. The Perrin-Beitel team breached the facility gate at 4:47:22 a.m. Agents moved to units 47 through 52 in a stacked formation. The padlocks on units 49 and 51 had been replaced with heavy-gauge commercial hardware, not consistent with standard U-Store at issue. Bolt cutters were used. Both units opened within 40 seconds of breach. Unit 49 contained cots, a chemical toilet, food packaging, and 8 children between the ages of 5 and 13. A battery-powered space heater was running in the corner. A portable fan was mounted to the wall. The children were awake. Some were sitting on the cots. One child was standing near the door when it opened. The agents didn't speak immediately. The entry team lead knelt down. The Spanish-language trauma coordinator entered behind the tactical team. She spoke first. Unit 51 contained 6 additional children, ages 4 through 11, and approximately $140,000 in cash in a sealed plastic storage bin. A laptop, 2 burner phones, and a printed spreadsheet were recovered from a folding table in the back of the unit. The spreadsheet listed initials, payment amounts, and dates. 9 rows, 9 families. At the Kulber Road facility, agents located 3 children in Unit 33, a single modified unit with climate control, and a secondary partition creating a back room not visible from the main entrance. The revised entry plan Mejia had drafted in 11 minutes had accounted for exactly that configuration. Without it, agents would have cleared the front room and missed the partition entirely. The Roland Avenue facility contained no children. It contained 2 individuals, later identified as members of the 7-person crew, along with $200,000 in cash, a handgun, an AR-15 rifle with an extended magazine, and the server hardware running the telegram relay system. Both individuals were in custody within 90 seconds of breach. Across all 3 sites, the operation took 11 minutes from initial breach to all clear. 14 children, all accounted for, all alive. The network had kept the children's physical condition stable, not out of concern, but out of operational logic. Dead or visibly harmed children would have ended the payment stream. The children had been fed. The units were climate controlled. The network had treated the operation like an inventory management problem. Here's the part that will probably draw some disagreement. The legal exposure for using Western Union for ransom compliance, even under coercion, was a documented concern that delayed 2 of the 9 families from cooperating with investigators for weeks after initial contact. The fact that immigrant families under these circumstances face even theoretical legal ambiguity about paying ransoms to protect their children is a systemic failure this case exposed clearly, and one that HSI's community outreach protocols were still not fully equipped to address. That gap almost cost the investigation its most cooperative witnesses. The 7-person crew taken into custody on May 3, 2026, ranged in age from 22 to 44. Federal prosecutors in the Western District of Texas filed charges including kidnapping, extortion, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit human trafficking. Arraignments were scheduled for May 9th. All 7 entered not guilty pleas. All 7 remained in federal custody without bond. The indictment described a crew background consistent with what HSI analysts had suspected from early in the investigation. 4 of the 7 had documented prior involvement with cartel logistics operations along the Texas-Mexico border. Not cartel members in any formal organizational sense. Subcontractors. They had moved product. They had managed safe houses. They had experience in the operational architecture of holding people and demanding payment for their release. The ransom operation was, in the assessment of HSI investigators, a lateral application of that experience. The children weren't trafficked in the traditional sense, not moved across borders, not sold into labor or exploitation. They were held as economic leverage. Extortion built on the architecture of trafficking. What do you think? Did the existing system fail these 9 families? Or was this the system working as designed, just too slowly? The cybercrime component produced one of the more significant technical results. HSI, San Antonio's digital forensics unit, extracted the full telegram relay server logs before the hardware at Roland Avenue could be remotely wiped. The server had a remote wipe protocol, a dead man's switch keyed to a specific telegram account that would have transmitted a wipe command if that account went inactive for more than 72 hours. When agents breached Roland Avenue at 4:47 a.m. on May 3rd, the account was still active. By 5:15 a.m., it had been seized and locked by HSI's digital team. The wipe command was never transmitted. The server logs were intact. Those logs documented more than 9 families. They documented communication threads with 2 additional recipient clusters. Families who had been contacted, assessed for vulnerability, and then not pursued. The reason for non-pursuit wasn't documented. But those threads meant the network had targeted more people than 9. The case was now potentially larger than the original scope. What you're probably wondering now is whether there was a 10th family, or more, who paid but whose payments never triggered a compliance flag and whose children were never identified in this investigation. That question was still open as of mid-July 2026. The cash recovery across all 3 sites totaled $340,000. The total confirmed ransom paid by the 9 families exceeded $1.1 million. The gap, approximately $760,000, wasn't recovered. Investigators believe a portion moved through the cryptocurrency layering network before the accounts were frozen. A portion likely moved in cash through the US-Mexico border crossing at Laredo. Tracing is ongoing. As of this account, the bulk of that money has not been located. The 14 children were transported to a family reunification center operated by a combination of ICE's Child Services Liaison Unit and a contracted nonprofit organization. Medical evaluations were conducted within 2 hours of recovery. All 14 were assessed as physically healthy, with no signs of physical injury or abuse. Several showed signs consistent with anxiety and sleep disruption. Counseling services were initiated immediately. Camila Delgado was reunited with her father, Marco, on May 4th, 2026, at 11:38 a.m. at the Reunification Center in San Antonio. The meeting was documented in the case file for evidentiary purposes. No one present in that room described what happened in clinical language. There are no clinical words for it. Within 72 hours of the raids, all 14 children had been returned to their families. One detail that stayed with me going through this reconstruction: the printed spreadsheet recovered from Unit 51. 9 rows. Each row had initials, a payment amount, and a date column that tracked every transfer received. 38 payments total across 6 months. The column was titled, in Spanish, Received. Not victims, not families, not even names, just the money, the date, and a confirmation mark. The network tracked its victims the way a vendor tracks invoices. One member of the 7-person crew hasn't been fully accounted for in the public record of this case. 6 individuals were taken into custody at the 3 storage facilities. A 7th, believed to have served as the network's logistics coordinator. The person who managed transfer routing, proof-of-life video production, and communications between the crew and the extortion targets, was identified through the server logs but hadn't been physically located as of the date of this account. A federal arrest warrant was issued on May 6, 2026. The individual is believed to have crossed into Mexico within 48 hours of the raids. Mexican federal authorities received a formal cooperation request through mutual legal assistance channels. As of mid-July 2026, no arrest had been made. Here's something that doesn't sit right, even now. The 7th individual's device fingerprint appeared in the server logs 90 minutes before the raids began. 11 communications were sent in that window. 3 went to the other crew members. 8 went to external numbers that haven't been fully traced. Whether those 8 communications were a warning to other people, other networks, other operations, is still an open question. Looking at this case from the outside, what it tells us about this specific exploitation model is something federal law enforcement had been tracking for years but rarely prosecuted in consolidated form. The precise targeting of undocumented or immigration-vulnerable families with separated children isn't opportunistic. It requires research, community access, and a network capable of holding children for extended periods without drawing local attention. The storage unit model wasn't improvised, it was engineered. The demand that made this operation profitable hasn't been eliminated. 9 families paid. 9 families will never fully understand how the network found them, or who identified their children as usable leverage, or whether others like them are currently in the same position, wiring money every week and saying nothing to anyone. Will operations like this surface again in the same form? The Telegram relay infrastructure has been dismantled at the server level in this case. The storage unit model is now documented in federal case files, which means similar configurations will draw HSI attention faster than they did before. But the targeting methodology, the exploitation of immigration vulnerability and family separation, doesn't require a Telegram relay or a U-Store-It unit. It only requires the knowledge that certain families will pay without going to the police. And that knowledge isn't dismantled by a raid. The network is gone. The 7th member is still out there. $340,000 in cash recovered. $760,000 still unaccounted for. 14 children home. A server's worth of unanswered questions sitting in a federal evidence vault in San Antonio. And somewhere in that vault, a spreadsheet. 9 rows. 38 payments. A column titled Received, marked in ink. Every single one confirmed. If you want to follow what comes next in the federal investigation into the 7th member and the open questions from those 8 external communications, subscribe. We track these cases through to the end. The operation was a success. By every metric, federal prosecutors will present at trial. 14 children recovered. 6 of 7 crew members in custody. The Telegram infrastructure dismantled. The proof of life video chain broken. What no metric captures is the 6 months that came before. 38 weekly payments. 38 moments in which 9 families wired money and waited for a 10-second video to confirm their children were still breathing. 38 weeks in which the only thing standing between those children and a worse outcome was the network's financial logic, its need to keep the payment stream active. The network is dismantled. The calculus that made those families targetable is still in place. Comment YES or NO. Do you think this specific exploitation model, storage unit holding operations targeting undocumented families, will resurface in a different city within the next 18 months? We read every one.